Hey, what's going on, everyone? Today we start the semifinals in the Magnus Carlsen Invitational. Two great players, Wesley So versus Anish Giri. It's going to be a great match. Very solid, very theoretical, guys. So let's just take a look at game one. Anish with the white pieces, Wesley playing with black. We have e4, e5, knight to f3, knight c6, bishop b5, and knight f6. We have a Berlin's defense. Anish here goes for the anti-Berlin with pawn to d3, and Wesley responds with one of the main variations here, bishop to c5. And voluntarily in this position, Anish goes for bishop takes on c6. The idea is that after pawn takes, you double up the black pawns here, and at the same time, you isolate this pawn here on e5 to attack. At the moment, white cannot capture with the knight right away, because if you do, if you go knight takes, then this queen to d4 comes, you attack the knight, you attack checkmate, so you cannot do this right away. So instead, in this position, white castles here, you go knight to d7, because actually you were trying to take now. So at least now with knight to d7, the knight protects the pawn, and at the same time, when more pressure comes now to this pawn, you will be able to play this move f6 in the future. Here c3, threatening to go d4 with a very strong center. Castles by black, d4 by white, and here bishop to d6. A very good move. Notice that you cannot just take here, because after you take, wherever this bishop goes, either to b6 or to d6, this very strong center by white here, with this knight coming to c3, is going to be a very hard game for black to play. So instead, this variation is not played, and Wesley goes for bishop to d6, keeping the tension in the center. Here, bishop to g5, a very good move, forcing this f6 by black. And notice, yes, you protect, you give support to this pawn here on e5, but at the same time, you're weakening this diagonal, and you're weakening the f7 square as well. So bishop to h4 by Anish, queen to e7, putting more support here on the pawn on e5, and at the same time, you are in some positions threatening to take here on e4 after some e takes on d4. So knight b to d2, protecting the pawn on e4. So now pawn takes is not possible. Queen to f7, the queen did its job already on the e file and is ready to transfer herself to maybe h5 and start attacking on the king side. The bishop comes to g3, putting even more pressure on the pawn on e5. Rook to e8, protecting on the e file. Queen to c2, a very logical move. You want to develop the queen, you want to connect your rooks to come to the center as well. Here, a5 is played by Wesley and b3 by Anish. E takes on d4, c takes on d4, and bishop takes on g3, and h takes on g3. Very interesting was also to go for f takes on g3, which will open up the game in some situations to go for some knight to e5, taking advantage of this very nasty x-ray on the queen here. But okay, we have h takes on g3, knight to b6. Yes, this knight doesn't have a lot of squares to go to. Notice that all the squares this knight can go to are taken, but the idea was not to place the knight there, but to get this bishop out. So here a4 is played. Another idea on the previous move that black had was to go a4 himself. So Anish is preventing that, he's fixing the pawn structure. Notice that this pawn on a5 is going to be very weak for a long time. And here bishop to g4. Anish wants to get rid of this bishop in some situations with maybe bishop takes on f3. Of course, at the moment, that is not possible, because you would just strengthen the white center with moves like g takes on f3. Rook f2 e1 is played, h6. Wesley is running out of moves, so he's making some prophylactic h6, preventing some knight to g5 in the event that in the future he goes for some f5 idea. So rook to e3, both players are just going to double up, double stacking the rooks on the e file. And here queen to c3, as I mentioned, this pawn is weak, so white, in order to improve his position more, is targeting this pawn. And Wesley protects it with queen to h5. A very, very long protection, but it's protected. Anyways, knight to h2, attacking the bishop, and bishop to e6 here. And Anish, playing very aggressively, goes for f4, expanding more on the king side. And look at this very beautiful, strong center that he has at the moment. The problem sometimes when you actually do this is that the pawns lack protection later on, and it could be very difficult to protect them. For example, there's no pawn here on c3 to protect the pawn on d4, so this could be very challenging later. The queen here f5 is played, sacrificing a pawn, and Anish takes it with queen takes on a5. Notice that if you try to take here on f5, well, then you have this intermediate knight to d5, attacking the queen, attacking the rook, and black would just win here. So instead, he goes for queen takes on a5, and here bishop to f7 by Wesley, a very good move. and Anish goes for a very deep idea with g4, sacrificing the pawn back, but thinking that here on this square he would always be able to target it with his knight and maybe in the future take it, and he will still have this very strong 3 pawns in the center, which will give him plenty of good play for him here. Wesley, of course, took his pawn back with f takes on g4, and Anish went for queen to c3. The endgame after queen takes on h5 was very favorable for white, and it's very surprising that Anish didn't go for this. After bishop takes here, then you just go knight d to f1, threatening knight to g3. This bishop is going to have to go back, and then you can capture on g4, and you would just be up a simple pawn. So I'm not sure what Anish missed, but he went queen to c3, queen to h4 with a very nasty threat of just going g3 in one move, attacking the knight, and at the same time taking the pawn on f4, knight d to f1, g3, as we mentioned, the knight took, and queen takes on f4. And here in just one move, Anish completely collapses. He goes knight to f5, an absolute blunder, and Wesley punished him right away with rook takes on e4. It's a blunder. I'm not sure what Anish missed. He's just collapsing here. Rook takes, and of course, you cannot trade this last rook because the queen would just take, and you know, black would just be up a pawn in a very good position. And rook to f1 was played, queen to g5, and here is probably what Anish missed. He probably had calculated that he had knight takes on h6, but after pawn takes, the idea that Anish had was to take on f7 and give a check on f3 after. After king takes, queen to f3, but you can just cover with both the queen and the rook, and nothing happens. Notice that that move that Anish missed was the fact that maybe he was thinking that the queen had to take, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. You can just cover on f4 with either the rook or the queen. So not sure if he missed this, or not sure if he just blundered that the pawn was no longer protected. But either way, a very good game by both players. Just a very nasty blunder at the end that gave Wesley the win. And Wesley is the first one to strike. He's leading the match. And who knows, we might be getting closer to that Wesley versus Magnus finals that everyone wants to see if Wesley can make it 3 in a row. All right, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe. Have a great day. Show respect to your opponent. See you on the next video.